Every seasoned gamer has had that feeling. Your session is coming to an end and it's getting late, but you can squeeze in time for just one more go. An hour and a half later, and you finally decide to call it. After just a little more. It's a common tale, told by many players about many games. A testament to the captivating power of gameplay. But what is the driving force behind this phenomenon? What convinces us to keep going for just one more go? Let's dig deeper by looking at Vampire Survivors, from the developer Ponkel, is a shoot-'em-up roguelike which sees the player taking on endless hordes of beasties. The game is apparently set in the modern-day Italian countryside, where you take on the role of one of a colourful cast of heroes, out to take vengeance on the Viscount Dracula. Tenuous lore aside, gameplay is very simple. Your goal? To survive as long as possible. Your character does most of the work, automatically attacking on an internal timer. All you have to do is move around and not get hit. On paper, this might sound too simple to be engaging. Far from it. In practice, it's heaps of fun, and the game has a lot of replayability. As you kill monsters and level up, you can select new weapons and modifiers, or upgrade your existing ones. Over time, the intensity of your attacks increases, along with the difficulty. It's an arms race. Level up, or become overwhelmed in a tide of monsters. This core gameplay loop is decently satisfying, but it's only one part of what makes this game so enticing. Vampire Survivors makes heavy use of what we call juice, or game feel. An informal term often used in video game discussion, juice refers to the intangible yet satisfying sensation you get when you interact with something in a game. It's a broad topic, incorporating visual and aural feedback, animation, game input, environmental context, but it could be boiled down thusly. If something feels satisfying to interact with, that's juicy. As an example of how juice enhances gameplay, let's consider the action of opening a chest and receiving an item. This can be done quite easily and without much fanfare. Open chest, get item. Job done. You could, however, add a little bit of that juice we were talking about. Now I'd wager that was much more enjoyable. The addition of animations and sound effects doesn't mechanically change anything, but it makes the action much more satisfying to perform. You feel rewarded for opening the chest, and now you're encouraged to find more. Finally, let's open one of the rare chests in game. Vampire Survivors does not mess around. Every action you take in the game has been given an element of satisfaction, even if it's just something small like a sound effect. Instead of gaining XP for each kill, enemies drop gems which grant experience. They gravitate towards you as you approach, and sucking up countless gems floods your character with power. Leveling up is snappy. Menu pops up, you make your choice, and continue with your massacre. There's no real break in the flow of action. Every weapon increases in size, power, and magnitude as they level up, piling on more and more projectiles and damage zones until you become a blender. The screen fills with a mess of projectiles, countless enemies, and even more XP gems. The result is a total power trip. Monsters evaporate the second you look at them. XP is pumped into your veins at an ever-increasing rate. Nothing can stop you, not even death itself. At least, for a time. Of course, it's important to note not every game needs this level of flashiness. Game feel can be applied differently depending on the style of the game. Its goal is to better connect and immerse the player in the game world. In Dark Souls, for example, such an animation would clash horribly with the atmosphere. Juice is used here instead to add a more realistic sensation of weight. Wielding heavy equipment causes the character to dodge and attack slower. In a similar vein, heavy weapons in Mordhau attack considerably slower, as you would expect. However, here the developers have made your physical inputs contribute to the game feel. If you want to swing your weapon in a specific direction, you have to move your mouse opposite that direction first, as if you were really pulling back to put your weight into that swing. If you take this concept and apply it to every player interaction in the game, then you have something that's going to keep the player's brain excited and engaged. For a little while at least. Without a solid, engaging game underneath, all the juice in the world won't get you very far. But let's pause for a moment here. While it's all well and good explaining what game feel is, we've got to go a bit deeper to see why it's so effective. (3,4-dihydroxyphenethylamine, or dopamine for short, is a neurotransmitter and hormone created in the brain and kidneys. It's involved in many bodily functions, from memory and attention to your mood and ability to learn. However, it's best known for its role in motivation and pleasure. Dopamine is part of your brain's reward system, as a way of training you into doing things which prolong your survival, like eating and drinking. Whenever you do something pleasurable, like say playing a video game, your brain releases dopamine, giving you that pleasurable sensation and satisfaction. Your brain becomes trained to seek out that feeling again and again. In a nutshell, dopamine tells you whether that thing you just did is something you should do again, whether or not it's actually good for you. Things like junk food, gambling, alcohol and drugs all release dopamine in the brain, urging you to partake of them more, which can lead to addiction and other health problems. In fact, I wanted to subtitle this video "Chasing the Dragon" until I looked up the actual connotations behind that phrase. But I digress. That's a story for another day. Every video game makes use of this sensation to grab you, keep you engaged and wanting to play more. That being said, over time your brain gets used to the feeling of satisfaction the game provides, until it's not enough and you're looking for something more, something different. This is where two main psychological hooks come into play, one short-term and one long-term. In the short term, let's talk about numbers. Humans love numbers, especially when numbers get bigger. Watching your favourite sports ball team, you want them to score, preferably more than their opponents. Just got paid? Let's go tally up those Benjis. Maybe you even like seeing those likes and subscribes go up. Hey? Anyway, virtually every game you play has numerical stats relating to the player. Health points, currency, experience, resources, you name it. In 99% of cases, you want those numbers to go up. Seeing those numbers get bigger and bigger triggers that dopamine response and gives you a sense of accomplishment, especially when direct action from the player has resulted in the increase. Whole games are built around numbers getting bigger. Take Cookie Clicker for example. The singular goal is to increase the number of cookies you have. Click the cookie, get a cookie. Number goes up. It doesn't get much simpler than that. You spend your cookies on upgrades which generate even more cookies, resulting in a positive feedback loop of cookie generation that reaches numbers so high it bends the laws of reality. Players will even spend hours and hours grinding for gold or XP just to reach that next level of advancement, a pastime commonly seen in RPGs and MMOs like RuneScape, which, in my opinion, has got to be one of the grindiest games known to man. Vampire Survivors makes great use of numbers, keeping track of the gold you collected and also the number of enemies you've slain. In a decent run, this can easily get into the tens of thousands. You're also treated to a spray of damage numbers erupting from the enemies. While the values themselves never get too ludicrous, the sheer volume of them gives you a feeling of power. They are mostly meaningless in the long run, but add to the visual noise and visceral satisfaction of blasting endless creatures into a shower of digits. At the end of the run, you're shown a stat screen, which includes a tally of all those little damage numbers, broken down by each weapon. It is very satisfying to see that you've just doled out several million points of damage over the last few minutes. Interestingly, your experience points are not represented numerically. They're simply shown a progress bar, which fills as you pick up more gems. It's a bit more abstract, but equally as satiating. The gold you collect during your runs can be spent on upgrades, which slightly increase the base stats of your character, giving them more of an advantage, and giving the player a goal to work towards. You spend numbers to get better numbers, to get even more numbers. However, you reach this goal after a few hours of gameplay, capping out all your stat upgrades. This is where the second, longer term hook comes into play. After reaching certain milestones during a run, you'll be awarded with new weapons, modifiers, characters, levels, heck, even whole new mechanics become available. When you first start, you gain unlocks aplenty after each run, giving you a small but steady stream of new things to play with. And of course, once you unlock something, you're going to want to try it out straight away, so into another run you go, where you might finish up with even more fresh unlocks, and well, you've got to try those out too. This is a vital part of the roguelike formula. Enter the Gungeon and Binding of Isaac work off of very similar principles. Each run starts you off with a clean slate, and the choices you make throughout your run will determine your success. Though failure isn't an issue here. You're not expected to make it to the end of the run on your first try after all. Each run allows you to build on the ones before, slowly increasing your options and overall power level. This constant drip feed of new features is captivating. I was totally hooked, and hadn't even noticed until the new unlocks started to slow down. Now, these aren't hidden. You're given a list of achievable unlocks with hints on how to acquire them. I could see that there was still plenty to collect, but the ones I wanted were no longer straightforward. So I found that I was stuck. I could see the prize, but not the path to it. There was something I was missing, a puzzle waiting to be solved. When you get to this crossroads, you can go one of two ways. Either you get bored without the constant promise of dopamine and move on to greener pastures, or you get creative. You know there's more to explore and uncover, but you have to work for it. This actively encourages you to think outside the box, expand your playstyle, push the boundaries of the game and see what rules can be broken. You never know, you might even unveil some of the secret unlocks, with some rather interesting results. This level of replayability is the final gear in Vampire Survivors' Dopamine machine. So let's sum up. Dopamine plays a major role in keeping the player engaged. If you can tickle the player's brain in the right way, then you have them hooked, provided that you can keep that dopamine flowing. With the right application of mechanics, presentation and juice, a game can definitely give you more than the sum of its parts. Vampire Survivors is a pleasant mix of relatively stress-free gameplay and hectic, over-the-top visuals. It's arcadey as hell and I love it. And I haven't even mentioned the kick-ass soundtrack, which you've been treated to this whole time. Because let's be honest, you often can't hear it over the gameplay. To me, Vampire Survivors feels like the natural evolution of internet flash games from many years ago. Simple mechanics and accessibility, but packs a lot of punch. You can definitely sense their DNA, and it makes sense because it has origins online. The game was originally released on itch.io in March of 2021, before getting its official release on Steam in October of last year. If this came out while I was still in school, you could guarantee that I'd be sneaking in a few goes during the computer labs. It's an excellent case study into the power of game feel and how little actual gameplay you can get away with. That's not to diminish the value of the gameplay, far from it. Without the power trip-inducing graphics, there's still a solid mechanical core which keeps the game moving and the player engaged. But you know, despite how it grabs you, despite all this game feel, all this energy and excitement, it's still missing just one thing. There's no f***ing vampires in it.